Almost a year ago, I watched as Boris Johnson's chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, labored through a press conference in which he had to explain to journalists why he had violated lockdown regulations. The press conference went on for hours, journalist after journalist asking the same question. Mr. Cummings, why did you do it? Why? Why did you do it? Why, innit? The Zimbabwean in me was shocked. A politician being put under pressure by journalists, a politician being held to account, unheard of. We actually have footage of the first and only time that a couple of journalists tried this in Zimbabwe.
Come in.
Pani ma journalist ati auya kuzokuona.
Auya kuzoona nini?
Hongo.
Ndambokutuma kuti uchedza ma journalist rini.
Ayo.
Saka unotaura ma journalist auya ega.
Auya kuzonzwisisa nyaya yestatutory yayo.
Ma journalist auya kuda kuzondibvunza. Anoona problem noitika vanhu vakatanga kufunga kuti vari kurarama mudemocracy. Vanhu vakatanga kufunga kuti vane freedom. Ndokufarisa ufonera kuti kurubi. Unzo kuti kune space here. Because clearly vanhu vari kufarisa. To make an example, this is what happens vanhu vakatanga kufunga kuti kune freedom. They want to question me. Ndinodana ma journalists.
That's why our focus today is on government communications and accountability, or lack thereof. Ladies and gentlemen, war vets and advocates, youth, welcome to the very first episode of Properganda with Kandoro. The Zimbabwean government is to communication and accountability what Harare men are to commitment. Once in a while it will happen, but generally, when it comes to announcing and introducing policy and directives, our government has a three-step model. First, they will leak it, and depending on the public's reaction, they will deny it. A few hours or days later, a high-ranking official would then come and confirm the said rumor. This three-step model sometimes turns into a four-step model. It just depends on who has the trimble of power that week. It's a very chaotic way of communicating because who do we hold accountable? Not long ago, the government announced that Kwekwe was going into lockdown because of the Indian variant. A document announcing the lockdown was leaked on the 21st of May. It circulated online, but Midlands Provincial Minister Larima Vima told the Chronicle that the document was fake. Barely 12 hours later, General Chiwenga announced that Kwekwe was in fact under lockdown. Just last week, the president announced that lockdown regulations were being relaxed to allow for events that accommodate up to 50 people. Mageto yiti akapuriza maspika, kuwacha butsu, kuwacha mawigi zvese. The very next day, Vice President Chiwenga announced that the country was actually going into total lockdown. I don't know about you, but I'm going to listen to the guy with the gun.
What's going on there? Mutazve kujama maspika. No, tanga tanzwa officer kuti wanzi zvakubvumizwa. No tanda. No mukuru kawata. Andi mukuru akata. Dzosera. Did you not hear the directive? Mukuru akazvivarisa zvemaspika zvomudzosera. Sorry officer. Aiwa tsikuita nharo. No, sorry officer. Dzosera. Aiwa. Dzosera. Don't make me come there mfanaka. Vanhu vangu vatongana mapo. Don't make me come there. Pakati pemwedzi. No. Hands tidzosere. Waguta kunyarwa. No, aiwa atsikuita nharo officer. Aiwa tandangonzwa mukuru angati. Nakuzwa kuti mukuru ane mukuru.
The new dispensation prefers the mushroom approach. A little office in every corner. Just take a look at Twitter. There's a presidential Twitter account. There's a Ministry of Information account. There's a Presidential Communications Department Twitter page. Then you have Nick Mangwana, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Information. Then you have George Charamba, a presidential spokesperson. That's 5 different accounts. Even if you mean well, how can this not lead to confusion and chaos? It's like having a choir of drunkards. All you're going to get is confidence and discord.
Musakundwa mu social media impindai morakashava mu social media.
count of the number of times that a government official has said or done something outlandish, but I don't remember ever seeing an official apology. Well, except if we're counting the one from Mohadi, and there he was actually apologizing that he had been caught. And generally, that's how it goes. This lack of accountability and professionalism at the top has trickled down to the lower levels of government. Corporate accounts, especially those from parastatals, are being treated like personal accounts. They don't care anymore. And honestly, why would they care? If George Charamba can tell SABC's Sophie Mokwena that he can send it to an early menstruation and have nothing happen to him, what's there to fear?
Asati waratanga kwidza handizwa tirishumba kaidrozi yayo. Bulala bulaba professionalism swapa social media. Kuma 11 on a Friday. Aiwa. Zviteka dabuzwa service delivery ndimbo yako.
As for George Charamba, the less said about him, the better. This is a man whose best days are clearly behind him. Back when the Herald was the only source of information, he sounded and appeared like a genius. And to be fair, he is responsible for some of the most impressive propaganda jobs in Zimbabwe's history. My father used to read The Other Side with Nathaniel Manero religiously. Afterwards, he would take his newly acquired vocabulary to the local pub where he would wow his friends with his big fancy words. And sadly, that's now the best way to describe Mr. Charamba, a man with a lot of big fancy words, high-sounding nothings. Mr. Charamba is a reminder of the state's reticence to accept that times have changed. Gone are the days when they had the country in an information chokehold, where they would force-feed jingles on people all day long. These days, you're going to get as much as you give, and just as quickly as you give it. The very poor communication is particularly frustrating because it overshadows some really great government projects that are underway. Projects like the Beitbridge border expansion, the airport expansion project, the small house, that's just Kembo Mohad. Sorry. These are projects that will actually benefit Zimbabwe, but Nick Mangwana and co choose to communicate these developments in the same way an evil stepmother will say, get well soon. It's both suspicious and very juvenile. But there are glimmers of hope, and it's important that we commend when we see efforts being made. The Parliament of Zimbabwe is a great example of a state institution that has done remarkably well in terms of transparency and great communications. The Hansard is applauded in time, and private media is allowed access to live stream parliamentary sessions on social media. This has led to more young people getting involved in national processes and conversations. Even though there's a lot that still can be done, we say, the long and short of this is there needs to be a difference in the way a government shares its directives and the way a local celebrity denies a sex tape. Otherwise, you might as well share both pieces of information on Zim Celebs. Why are we, in 2021, still getting government press statements that look like they've been written kukresh? Random fonts, where's the letterhead, where's the signature? Poor government communications deny citizens the opportunity to plan ahead. They feed into fake news and ultimately cause panic. Stop sharing important information in the middle of the night. Hamuzi varoi.
Zimbabwe haipa unosha kuti ndani ari kukuroya ka uyo ari hurumende.
Maybe professionalism and accountability is a lot to ask for, especially considering that we are just citizens. But at the very least, have some shame. Have some shame. This has been an episode of Propaganda with Kandoro. If everything goes well, catch you guys next week.